Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at B&T in Thun, Switzerland, taking a look at some of the cool historical guns in their reference collection. And today we have a Chinese Type 79 submachine gun. Now interestingly, this is one that was sold. It was manufactured without the buttstock, which is a little bit odd, and I don't have any particularly good explanation for that, but the rest of the gun is just well, as it was originally made in China. So one of the interesting things about the Type 79 is this gun had a very long development cycle. Production or development actually began in 1966, but it was not type classified and adopted until 1979. So like 13 years to develop this submachine gun. It's a project, the main designer, by the way, was a gentleman by the name of Liu Zidang, whose name I'm almost certainly butchering. I apologize for that. Development was sort of an on and off process, and there were a number of iterative tests along the way that the gun didn't quite pass and had to go back and like change this, change that. So there was testing in 1971, 74, 75, and finally in 78. The 1978 testing is where it finally was approved, was type classified, and was formally adopted in September of 1979. Now, interestingly, and I apologize, I don't really know enough background history on this to tell you the full story, but twice, in 1971 and again in 1976, copies of this gun show up in the hands of dissident groups in China. And like I said, I just don't have the background knowledge of Chinese political intrigue to know exactly what was going on there, but hey guys, future Ian here. I need to interject for a moment because since I filmed this video, I've actually become aware of exactly the right person who can give us all, you and me, the necessary background on the development of the Type 79. What were all the weird shenanigans going on with it? Why did it take so long, and why was it developed? All of that really good information that I just don't have myself. This person is Jason Clower. He's a professor at Chico State University, specializing in Asian studies and in particular in China. And about 6 months ago, he started a YouTube channel called Type 56, The Story of China's Army, which is in essence an entire university level course about the Chinese PLA and its adoption of the Type 56 SKS and why they kept that rifle for so long in the face of what seemed like a lot of better options. I am coordinating this video release with his video on the Type 79. He knows all the background. I actually have the gun that I can take apart for you, and between the two, I think you'll get a fantastic view of what was the Type 79. So I have linked to his video down in the description text below. You should definitely check it out, and once you watch that one, frankly, you should go back and watch everything else that he's done because it's really interesting. So let's get back to disassembly now. Anyway, what we have here is a significantly more complicated gun than it probably needs to be, and also a very compact gun. Like, you can see how tiny this thing is. Of course, it doesn't have the stock, but the original stock was also a pretty darn low profile sort of arrangement. This is locked breech, rotating bolt, short stroke, gas piston operated, but in 7.62 by 25 millimeter. So let's take a closer look and let me pull it apart and show you what's going on inside. All right, so first off, I do want to point out this appears to be a factory semi-auto gun, and I have absolutely no background details on when that was made, exactly why. I mean, the obvious why is export sales, but we have a selector switch / dust cover, like an AK here, that has been pinned into the semi-auto position. There is a full auto trip inside that doesn't do anything. This in standard military service, these were full auto, but this one's made as semi. This also has this rear cap welded onto the back end. You can see the weld right there and right there, but it's clearly factory done. There's a serial number stamp on the back that's in the same font, same style as all the other serial numbers. Again, seems like perhaps this was removed so that it could be sold as a pistol in the United States, maybe, or I don't know, maybe some other set of import regulations for a different country entirely. But that's why we have these two features here. Now, standard Type 79 elements, we have a magazine release button right here on the side with a nice shield around it so that you can't, well, it's less likely that you'll bump it on your gear or on something and accidentally drop the mag. It is a 20 round double stack, double feed magazine. We do have one witness hole here to tell you when it's fully loaded. And this gives a rate of fire of approximately 1,000 RPM, which is pretty fast for a lightweight little gun like this. The sights are a pretty funky different style. The front sight, not so much. That's just a shrouded round post. But the rear sight is this square block that is it's cast into the trunnion / gas block, which is all one component. I'm not sure exactly what alloy they made this out of, but it was something that kind of turned a plum orange when it was blued. That might be the result of being at the very end, essentially the Friday of the heat treating, and the bluing solution was getting weak, or it could just be a different alloy that reacts that way when it's blued. We see that on various other gun parts at different times and places. Anyway, we have a rear sight set in this square housing. It has two positions, 1 and 2, I presume 100 and 200 meters, and it's a little square notch sight in there. And if I push this through and rotate it, I can switch to the 200 meter notch, and back to 100. That gives you a little bit of an unusual sort of sight picture. It's essentially a shrouded front post and a shrouded rear notch. But if you use this while shooting, I have to imagine that your sight picture disappears the moment you pull the trigger on what is a sub 2 kilo. This is a 4.2 pound gun at 1,200 or at 1,000 rounds a minute. That's going to turn into a not sight picture extremely quickly. Now for disassembly, we're just going to push in the rear of the mainspring here and lift off a dust cover. Clearly AK inspired, but a little bit different because it's held in by the spring guide back there. I then come in and pull the spring forward and out. So that's the recoil spring, and it's got a guide rod inside there. Next, we have a buffer that's just sort of sitting in here with friction. We're going to pull that out. There we go. That limits bolt travel, and it's got a rubber pad here to act as a buffer. And with that out, I can now move the bolt back until the bolt's lugs line up with those 4 openings. So right there, and lift the bolt out. So as long as that recoil buffer's in place, the bolt can't come far enough back to lift out. We have a rotating bolt here, locked breech, pretty chunky bolt. Comes out, obviously, again, AK inspired, but not exactly the same. So for example, we have the rotating cam lug here on the carrier and the cam track on the bolt, which is the reverse of the setup on the AK. The fire control group in there is basically an AK fire control group. You can see we have the full auto release right there, the safety sear, but on this gun that doesn't actually do anything. Ejector is part of the bolt guide rail like an AK. And then this reddish orange piece acts as both front trunnion and gas block and feed ramp, and kind of everything. You can see here we have a sheet metal receiver that is riveted onto that front trunnion. Same sort of deal back here. We have one rivet going through, attaching this end cap that would normally have been a rear trunnion with a shoulder stock on it. We can also disassemble the gas system. So I'm going to lift this spring catch up, rotate it out of the way. This pin slides out, and then I can pull out the gas block right there. So there's your gas port coming through the gas block. And there's the gas piston. Now, in the gas block itself, we have a captive spring right here. That does nothing for the gas system because that is actually the catch that holds the top folding stock in place. But of course, we don't have the stock on this example. But that's why there's a spring in there. Normally, you'd simply have your gas port right there. The gas piston butts up right against it. And when this pushes back, it's going to push right there on the bolt carrier, and then the mainspring is going to push the bolt forward, which in turn pushes the gas piston back into place. All right, and there is the whole thing disassembled. Now, for a 7.62 by 25 millimeter Tokarev submachine gun. Do you really need the complexity of a rotating locked breech short stroke gas piston assembly? Many people would probably suggest no, but on the other hand, having a locked breech does allow you to have a substantially reduced mass of your bolt and carrier, of your moving components, that does allow you to have a lighter gun. And this thing comes in at 1.9 kilos or 4.2 pounds, which is very small and compact. It's got a 10-inch barrel on it, and the overall length of the thing is only about 20 inches with, even if you have the stock, it folds across the top out of the way. So they did get something very compact and quite light. These first saw combat in the Sino-Vietnamese War in 1979, and they were really, that's kind of the environment they were designed for, was jungle fighting. Unfortunately, they turned out to be not sufficiently reliable to work for the Army. So there was a couple-year period through like 1981 when they found issues, revised the design a bit, tweaked the design a bit, made some improvements, but ultimately this was never a satisfactory gun in service for the Chinese military, and they would end up developing the Type 85 to take over from it in Army service. Now that doesn't mean the guns just went away, because these actually got transferred in pretty large numbers, and total manufacturing, as far as I can tell, is something around or just in excess of 200,000 of the guns, so quite a lot of them. But they went in to see a lot of service with Chinese police units. Think of this kind of like the Rising submachine guns in American service. They prove not really, like, people don't really like them in combat in the jungles in Guadalcanal, but if you're a factory security guard or a policeman on the beat, a Rising's a great gun for you. Same sort of thing here. It's a very compact gun. It's closed bolt, which means easier to make good, precise single shots with. It really is actually pretty well suited to police work, and that's where it went. And it remains in police service actually to this very day. And there have been a bunch of, at least a couple of companies that have made a bunch of different versions of modernization kits for the Type 79. So if you go look now, you can find pictures of Chinese policemen with Type 79s that essentially look like they've been dragged through the Chinese equivalent of the Tapco catalog. They've got big quad rail assemblies on front, they've got adjustable polymer buttstocks, new pistol grips. Like, it's almost to the point of the only recognizable element of the original gun is the magazine sticking out the bottom that you can still distinctively recognize today. But those modernization kits appear to have been done really to a greater extent than any of the other Chinese submachine guns that did see police service as well. So I believe this was formally, officially replaced for the police by the QZB-05 submachine guns in early mid-2000s, but that sort of replacement doesn't mean that they've actually completely been swapped out. And so there are still Type 79s in service today, and now when you see them, hopefully you'll know what they are. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. A big thanks to B&T for giving me access to this one out of their reference collection to take a look at. Thanks for watching.